Detective Sarah Chin stared at the evidence board, rain drumming against the precinct windows. 17 missing persons cases in 4 months, and the only connection was so absurd she'd kept it out of the official reports. Every victim had been wearing a distinctive hat when they vanished. The call came in at 3:47 a.m. Another one. Sarah grabbed her coat and drove through the empty streets, windshield wipers fighting the October downpour. The scene was a 24-hour diner on Highway 9, security cameras capturing everything in stark black and white. She watched the footage 3 times. A woman in her 30s, wearing a vintage cloche hat, sits alone at the counter. Coffee grows cold as she checks her phone. At 2:33 a.m., a man approaches, tall, thin, wearing a baseball cap pulled low. They talk briefly. She nods, stands, follows him outside. The camera angle cuts off at the door. Same as the others? Officer Martinez asked, joining her at the monitor. Sarah nodded. Down to the approach. Friendly conversation, victim leaves willingly. She paused the video on the man's face, barely visible under his cap. Run facial recognition again. Something about him feels familiar. Back at her desk, Sarah spread out the case files. Marcus Webb, 34, last seen wearing a fedora at Pike Place Market. Jennifer Torres, 28, distinctive beret, disappeared from a bus stop. David Kim, 41, vintage baseball cap, never made it home from work. The pattern was undeniable, but explaining it to Captain Rodriguez had been career suicide. She'd been taken off lead detective and relegated to consulting. Her computer chimed. Facial recognition hit. The man from the diner footage matched 3 other cameras across the city over the past 2 weeks. Always wearing different hats, sometimes a beanie, sometimes a cowboy hat, once a police cap that made her stomach turn. But the height, the build, the way he moved, it was definitely the same person. More disturbing was where he'd been spotted. Outside hat shops. Near vintage clothing stores. At estate sales and thrift markets. Always watching, always evaluating. Sarah's phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. Check the basement at 1247 Elm Street. Come alone. Trust no one in the department. Her blood went cold. Only 5 people knew about her hat theory. 4 of them were her colleagues. She should have called for backup. Should have followed protocol. Instead, she found herself driving toward Elm Street as dawn broke gray and wet over the city. The house was a narrow Victorian, paint peeling, windows dark. The kind of place that looked abandoned but wasn't quite empty. The front door was unlocked. Sarah drew her weapon, called out standard police identifications, got only silence in return. The house smelled like dust and something else. Leather, wool, the musty scent of old fabric. Her flashlight beam revealed a living room that looked normal, almost obsessively clean. No personal photos. No books. No television. Just empty walls and sparse furniture. The basement door stood open. What she found below defied every rational explanation she'd prepared herself for. The walls were lined with shelves, floor to ceiling, each holding dozens of hats arranged with museum-like precision. Fedoras, bowlers, berets, baseball caps, winter hats, sun hats, children's caps, women's cloches. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, each carefully labeled with a date and a name. She recognized the vintage cloche from last night's victim. Marcus Webb's fedora. Jennifer Torres's beret. But there were so many others, labels dating back years. Some names she recognized from cold cases, missing persons files that had gone nowhere. At the center of the room sat a workbench with tools she couldn't identify, small brushes, bottles of clear liquid, what looked like preservation equipment. A half-finished project lay open, a hat being carefully cleaned, restored, prepared for display. Beautiful, aren't they? Sarah spun toward the voice. A man stood at the bottom of the stairs, the same height and build from the security footage, but his face was completely ordinary. The kind of face you'd forget immediately. He wore no hat now, his thinning hair neatly combed. Where are they? Sarah kept her weapon trained on him. Where are the people? He looked genuinely confused. People? Oh, Detective Chin, you misunderstand. They're not missing. They're transformed. Elevated. Do you know how much of human personality exists in a simple hat? The way someone chooses to present themselves to the world? You're under arrest for kidnapping and... Kidnapping? He laughed, a sound like dry leaves. I liberate them. Free them from the burden of identity, of choice, of the constant weight of being someone specific. Look around you. Each hat contains an entire human experience, distilled to its essence. Sarah's radio crackled. Chun, report your location immediately. I wouldn't answer that, the man said softly. You've been asking too many questions about things people prefer remain buried. Why do you think you were taken off the case? Why do you think that tip came from an unknown number? Her hand froze over her radio. What are you talking about? Check the labels more carefully, detective. Look at the dates. Look at the names. Then ask yourself why a department with a 93% case closure rate suddenly has 17 unsolved disappearances that no one wants to talk about. Sarah's flashlight beam found a section of newer acquisitions. The dates made her sick. They corresponded exactly with her missing persons cases. But other labels, older ones, showed names she recognized from cold cases. Cases that had been officially closed, marked solved, filed away. The department has been feeding you cases, she whispered. Not the department. Just a few key people who understand the value of my work. People who appreciate art, who recognize that some human problems require creative solutions. Homeless individuals no one reports missing. Witnesses who might testify about uncomfortable truths. People who've outlived their usefulness to those in power. Her radio crackled again. Shin, respond immediately or we're sending units to your location. They're tracking your radio, the man said. They know exactly where you are. The question is, what happens to Detective Sarah Chen when she becomes inconvenient? Sarah's mind raced. The text message. The unlocked door. The perfect basement discovery. She'd been led here, set up to find evidence that could destroy careers, maybe the entire department command structure. You're not just a collector, she said. You're the cleanup crew. I prefer to think of myself as a curator. Each hat tells a story that would otherwise be lost. Your story, for instance, a dedicated detective who got too close to the truth. What hat were you wearing when you left the house this morning, detective? Sarah's free hand went unconsciously to her head. Her favorite knit cap, the one her daughter had made for her last Christmas. Hand-knitted. Personal significance. It will make a beautiful addition to the collection. Row 47, I think. Right between the transit worker who saw too much and the social worker who asked the wrong questions. The basement lights went out. In the darkness, Sarah heard footsteps on the stairs above. Multiple sets. Heavy boots. Her colleagues, coming to help or coming to silence her permanently. Her radio burst to life with her captain's voice. Chin, maintain your position. We have the building surrounded. In the blackness, the collector's voice was barely a whisper. They're not here to arrest me, detective. Check your hat one more time. Look at the label I sewed inside while you were distracted. Sarah's blood turned to ice as her fingers found the small tag inside her knit cap. In the faint glow of her phone screen, she could read the careful handwriting. Detective Sarah Chin. Collection date, today. The footsteps reached the basement door. Sarah realized she had seconds to decide who to trust in a world where everyone might be complicit. The man who collected people's identities, or the colleagues who delivered her to him. Outside, the rain kept falling, washing away evidence and muffling the sounds that came from 1247 Elm Street. By morning, there would be one more cold case file, one more career-dedicated detective who'd simply vanished while investigating a lead that officially never existed. And in a basement that would never be searched by people who already knew what was there, a new hat would join the collection, hand-knitted with love, labeled with care, and still warm from the head of someone who'd trusted the wrong people. The collector smiled as he adjusted the newest addition to his display. Detective Chen's cap looked perfect on shelf 47, right between the others who'd gotten too close to the truth. Above, the footsteps retreated, and the house returned to its patient silence. Maya Rodriguez discovered the truth at 2:47 a.m. while reviewing footage in her cluttered home office, rain drumming steadily against the windows. What she saw in the body camera video made her stomach drop so violently she had to pause the playback and step outside for air. The timestamp read 3 days ago. Officer Janet Mills, Maya's friend, the woman who'd invited her to family barbecues, was standing over a handcuffed suspect in an alley behind Murphy's bar. The audio was crystal clear. "Nobody's coming for you," Janet's voice said, calm as discussing the weather. "Maya's little documentary project ends at the station. What happens here stays here." Maya had always believed in transparency. As a freelance journalist covering local government for the past 5 years, she'd built her reputation on fair reporting and genuine relationships with the people she wrote about. The Millbrook Police Department knew her by name, waved when she showed up at press conferences, even invited her to their annual barbecue. Chief Patterson called her the good one, the reporter who actually listened. That's why what she discovered in her footage felt like watching her own execution. It had started innocently enough 6 months ago. Maya had been documenting community policing initiatives for a series on police reform success stories. The department's public relations officer, Sergeant Kim Torres, had enthusiastically supported the project. "We've got nothing to hide," Kim had said with that bright smile Maya thought she knew so well. "Full transparency, that's our motto now." Officer Janet Mills had agreed to wear a body camera during routine patrols. Maya followed up with ride-alongs, interviewed community members, attended department meetings. Everyone was so accommodating, so open. She should have wondered why. The footage Maya was reviewing now came from body cameras she'd installed herself, high-definition units with extended battery life and cloud backup. The department had their own cameras, of course, but Maya wanted independent documentation for her story. She presented it as a backup system, a way to ensure nothing was missed. Now she understood they'd agreed because they thought she was only documenting their official interactions. They didn't know about the buffer recording feature. The cameras captured 30 seconds before activation and continued 15 seconds after shutdown. In those hidden moments, Maya found her nightmare. Officer Mills discussing which immigrant businesses to visit for off-the-books payments. Sergeant Torres coordinating witness intimidation. Detective Ray Murphy, who'd helped Maya move apartments last spring, planning how to plant evidence on a city council member asking too many questions about department budgets. But the worst discovery was Chief Patterson's voice on Detective Murphy's camera from 2 weeks ago. "Maya's getting close to wrapping up her little project. Kim says she's got enough positive footage to make us look like saints. After it airs, we'll have breathing room to handle our other problems." Maya felt sick realizing what other problems meant. 3 activists who'd been asking questions about police spending had been arrested on drug charges in the past month. A city auditor had been found with child exploitation material on his computer. A homeless advocate had simply disappeared. She called her editor at the Herald Tribune. Voicemail. She tried the news director at Channel 7. Also voicemail. At 3 a.m., Maya realized she might be more isolated than she'd thought. Her phone buzzed. Text from Janet Mills. "Hey! How's the editing going? Can't wait to see the final cut. Coffee tomorrow?" Maya stared at the message. Janet had never texted her this late. She scrolled up through their message history. Months of friendly exchanges, dinner invitations, shared jokes. All of it felt poisonous now. Another text from Sergeant Torres. "Hope you're not working too late. Remember, work-life balance is important. See you at the morning briefing?" Then Chief Patterson. "Maya, just wanted to thank you again for showing the community who we really are. Looking forward to the premiere next week." They knew she was awake. They knew she was reviewing footage. They were watching her. Maya checked her home security system on her phone. Motion sensors showed movement in her backyard 20 minutes ago. The app claimed it was just a raccoon, but the shadow on the camera looked decidedly human-shaped. She grabbed her laptop and backup drive, stuffed them into a waterproof bag, and headed for her car. The rain had intensified, turning the street into a maze of puddles and poor visibility. Perfect cover for whatever they had planned. As she drove toward the highway, Maya tried to think of someone she could trust. Her ex-boyfriend worked for the FBI, but they hadn't spoken in 2 years. Her sister lived 3 states away but wouldn't understand the urgency. The ACLU lawyers she'd interviewed last month seemed like her best option, if she could reach them. Her rearview mirror showed headlights maintaining a steady distance behind her, close enough to keep her in sight, far enough to avoid suspicion. Professional surveillance. Maya's phone rang. Chief Patterson. Maya, where are you going so late? We got a call about someone matching your description driving erratically. Just want to make sure you're okay. Her blood went cold. They were tracking her phone, her car, probably everything else too. I'm fine, Chief. Just couldn't sleep, decided to drive around. Why don't you pull over? Officer Mills is nearby, she can check on you. She's worried about you working so hard on this project. Maya realized the headlights behind her had gotten closer. Much closer. Actually, I think I'll head home now. Thanks for checking. Maya, I really think you should pull over. For your own safety. The police cruiser behind her lit up its emergency lights. Maya floored the accelerator, her Honda struggling against the rain-slicked road. The cruiser stayed with her easily, but didn't try to force her off the road. They wanted this to look like an accident, she realized. A tired journalist who'd been working too hard, lost control in the rain. She took the exit toward the state forest, hoping the winding mountain roads would give her an advantage. The cruiser followed, patient as a hunting cat. Maya's phone kept ringing. Different numbers now. Detective Murphy. Sergeant Torres. Even officers she barely knew. All of them claiming concern, all of them asking where she was, all of them suggesting she stop the car. In the darkness ahead, Maya saw a roadblock. 3 police vehicles, emergency lights painting the wet asphalt in red and blue. Officers she recognized standing in the rain, waving flashlights, directing her to pull over. She had seconds to decide between people she'd considered friends and the evidence that could destroy them all. Maya swerved off the road into the forest, her car bouncing violently over roots and rocks until it finally stalled against a massive oak tree. She grabbed her bag and ran into the darkness, branches tearing at her clothes, rain soaking through to her skin. Behind her, flashlight beams cut through the trees. Radio chatter echoed between the trunks. They were coordinating a search, professional and thorough. Maya! Janet's voice called out, friendly as ever. Maya, are you hurt? We just want to help. Maya pressed deeper into the woods, clutching her evidence. She had to reach civilization, had to find someone who wasn't part of their network. But as the voices grew closer and the flashlight beams swept systematically through the trees, she realized how small her world had become. Everyone she trusted was hunting her. Everyone who could help her was either complicit or already gone. The rain kept falling, washing away her footprints, muffling her movements, turning the forest into a maze where she could run forever but never truly escape. From somewhere in the darkness behind her, Chief Patterson's voice carried clearly through the storm. Maya, we know you're scared. But think about this rationally. You're just one person with a story nobody will believe. We're your friends. We're your community. We're all you have. Maya realized with crystalline clarity that he was right. In a world where the people sworn to protect and serve were the predators, where could someone like her possibly run? She stopped moving and listened to the rain. Detective Marcus Webb's phone buzzed at 11:47 p.m. with a call that would unravel everything he thought he knew about his own precinct. The voice on the other end was shaking, barely coherent through the static of a bad connection and what sounded like heavy rain. There's a mansion. In Riverside Heights. It's not on any map, but I've been watching it for 3 weeks. People go in. They don't come out. Marcus had worked missing persons for 8 years. Anonymous tips usually led nowhere, but something about this caller's terror felt authentic. The line went dead before he could ask for a name. He should have logged the call and forgotten about it. Instead, Marcus found himself driving through the October rain toward Riverside Heights, the city's most exclusive neighborhood where CEOs and politicians lived behind iron gates and manicured hedges. The address didn't exist. According to city records, GPS systems, and even Google Earth, the stretch of Elmwood Drive between numbers 1247 and 1251 contained nothing but a small public park. But as Marcus drove slowly through the downpour, his headlights caught something that made him pull over and stare. Between two massive oak trees, barely visible through the rain and shadows, stood ornate iron gates. Beyond them, a long driveway disappeared into darkness. No streetlights illuminated the entrance. No mailbox marked the address. But the gates were real, solid, and slightly open. Marcus had lived in this city his entire life. He'd patrolled these streets as a rookie 15 years ago. This mansion had never been here. The next morning, Marcus checked every database available to city employees. Property records showed an empty lot owned by the city since 1987. Tax assessments listed no structures. Utility companies had no service records for any address between 1247 and 1251 Elmwood Drive. According to every official source, the mansion he'd seen simply didn't exist. But Marcus Webb had a memory that wouldn't let go. He'd seen the gates, felt the weight of something massive lurking behind those trees. More disturbing was the nagging sensation that he'd seen this place before, in reports or conversations he couldn't quite recall. That afternoon, he visited the city planning office. Elena Rodriguez, the records clerk he'd known for years, pulled up architectural surveys of Riverside Heights dating back to the 1920s. "There's nothing there, Marcus," she said, scrolling through decades of maps. "Never has been. Just that little park where the Johnson family used to have their flower garden." But as Elena's finger traced the empty space on a 1963 survey map, Marcus noticed something strange. The map showed property lines for 1247 and 1251 Elmwood Drive, but the space between them was larger than it should be. Much larger. "Elena, can you overlay this with a current satellite image?" When she did, Marcus felt cold certainty settle in his stomach. The empty space on the map perfectly matched the size and shape of the mansion grounds he'd seen the night before. Someone had very carefully erased a massive estate from every official record, but they'd forgotten to adjust the property boundaries. "This is impossible," Elena whispered, staring at the screen. "You can't just disappear a mansion." Marcus spent the rest of the day making discreet inquiries. 3 missing persons cases from the past 6 months had last been seen in Riverside Heights. Amanda Torres, a city auditor investigating municipal contracts. David Kim, a journalist working on a story about police overtime budgets. Jennifer Walsh, a social worker who'd been asking questions about child protective services. All 3 had been investigating city government. All 3 had vanished without a trace. And all 3, according to their cell phone records, had made their last calls from the vicinity of Elmwood Drive. What Marcus discovered next made him question everything he thought he knew about his own department. Detective Ray Sullivan, Marcus's partner for 4 years, had been the responding officer on all 3 missing persons cases. Sullivan had interviewed witnesses, filed reports, and officially concluded that each person had likely left town voluntarily due to personal stress and financial difficulties. Marcus pulled Sullivan's case files. The work was sloppy, investigations half-hearted, witness statements incomplete. For a cop with an otherwise stellar record, Sullivan had shown remarkably little interest in finding 3 missing people. More disturbing were the overtime records Marcus accessed through his union login. Sullivan had been working unusual late-night shifts, often in Riverside Heights, going back over a year. Hours that didn't appear on official department schedules. Marcus called in sick the next day and spent 12 hours conducting surveillance on Elmwood Drive. From 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., he saw nothing unusual. The mansion remained invisible behind its veil of trees and rain. But at 7:23 p.m., As darkness fell and the October storm intensified, Marcus watched a black sedan pull up to those impossible gates. Detective Ray Sullivan stepped out of the driver's seat. Marcus followed at a distance as Sullivan approached the gates, which opened silently at his approach. The sedan disappeared up the dark driveway, leaving Marcus alone on an empty street that officially contained nothing but a public park. An hour later, Sullivan emerged alone. No passengers. No explanation for what business a city detective might have at a mansion that didn't exist. Marcus made a decision that would either solve 3 missing persons cases or end his career. He parked his car 6 blocks away and approached the mansion on foot, using the storm for cover. The gates stood slightly ajar, as if waiting for him. Marcus slipped through and followed the winding driveway, his flashlight revealing pristine landscaping and architectural details that belonged in a different century. The mansion loomed ahead, 3 stories of Gothic windows and stone gargoyles that had no business existing in a modern American city. Every window was dark except one on the 2nd floor, where warm light flickered like candlelight or firelight. Marcus circled the building, looking for a way inside that wouldn't require breaking and entering charges he couldn't explain. The back door was unlocked. The interior defied logic. Expensive furniture, original artwork, Persian rugs that probably cost more than Marcus's annual salary. But everything felt frozen in time, as if the mansion existed in its own bubble separate from the outside world. Marcus climbed the main staircase toward the lighted room, each step creaking despite the apparent age and quality of the wood. The sound echoed strangely, as if the house were much larger inside than its exterior suggested. The light came from a study lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. A fire burned in an ornate fireplace, casting dancing shadows across leather furniture and polished wood. At the center of the room sat an antique desk covered with files and photographs. Marcus recognized the faces immediately. Amanda Torres, David Kim, Jennifer Walsh. But there were dozens of others, photos of people he didn't recognize, along with detailed files documenting their lives, their work, their investigations into city business. A leather-bound ledger lay open on the desk. Page after page of names, dates, and what looked like payment records. Marcus found his own name on the current page, with today's date and a notation that made his blood run cold. Surveillance detected. Termination authorized. You shouldn't have come here, Marcus. Marcus spun toward Detective Sullivan's voice. His partner stood in the doorway, no longer the friendly colleague Marcus had known for years. Sullivan's expression was calm, professional, almost sad. Ray, what is this place? Where are Torres, Kim, and Walsh? Gone. Like you're going to be. Like everyone who gets too curious about things that don't concern them. Marcus backed away from the desk, his hand moving instinctively toward his service weapon. Ray, we've been partners for 4 years. We've saved each other's lives. You can't. I can't what? Protect something bigger than both of us. This mansion has been here for 80 years, Marcus. It's where problems get solved. Where inconvenient people disappear. Where the city's real business gets done. The files on the desk told a different story. Names going back decades. Journalists, activists, auditors, anyone who'd gotten too close to corruption that ran deeper than Marcus had ever imagined. The department knows about this place? The department? Sullivan laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Marcus, who do you think pays for the maintenance? The utilities that don't exist on paper? The security that keeps people from asking questions? Marcus realized with growing horror that the mansion wasn't hidden from the police. It was operated by them. A black site for dealing with problems that couldn't be solved through official channels. How many? Marcus whispered. How many what? How many problems we've solved? How many people have contributed to the greater good by simply disappearing? Does it matter? The city runs smoothly. Crime stays manageable. Everyone benefits from the system working properly. Marcus's radio crackled to life. All units, be advised, Detective Marcus Webb is considered armed and dangerous. Approach with caution. Sullivan smiled sadly. They're already surrounding the house, Marcus. Captain Morrison has declared you mentally unstable, dangerous to yourself and others. The official story will be that you broke into a condemned building and, well, accidents happen in old structures. Through the study windows, Marcus could see flashlight beams cutting through the rain. Multiple units, tactical positions, professional coordination. His own department was preparing to eliminate him with the same efficiency they'd used on Amanda Torres and the others. There's nowhere to run, Sullivan said gently. The mansion doesn't exist, remember? No one will ever look for you here. No one will even know you're missing. Marcus stared at his partner, at the files documenting decades of disappearances, at the radio confirming that his colleagues were positioning themselves to ensure he never left this impossible place alive. The truth behind everything was so much worse than he could have imagined. The final piece of the puzzle changed everything, and there was no going back. Marcus wasn't just discovering corruption. He was discovering that the corruption had already discovered him. His investigation hadn't been subtle or clever. Every database search, every records request, every conversation with Elena Rodriguez had been monitored and reported. They'd been expecting him. The anonymous phone call, the unlocked gates, the open back door, it had all been designed to lead him here, to this moment when the city's darkest secret could finally claim him. The phone call last night, Marcus said. That was you. We needed you to find this place on your own. To make the choices that brought you here. It's cleaner that way. More believable when Internal Affairs investigates your disappearance. Outside, Marcus could hear boots on gravel, radios crackling with tactical coordination. His fellow officers, people he'd trusted with his life, preparing to end it on the orders of commanders who'd been feeding problems to this mansion for decades. What happened in those next few moments will stay with me forever. Marcus looked at the files scattered across the desk, evidence of a systematic program to eliminate inconvenient people, sanctioned and operated by the police force he'd devoted his life to serving. He thought about Amanda Torres, whose only crime had been auditing city contracts. About David Kim, who'd been investigating police overtime fraud. About Jennifer Walsh, who'd asked too many questions about missing children. And he realized that Detective Marcus Webb, who'd spent 8 years trying to find missing people, was about to become one himself. The footsteps were closer now. Voices in the hallway. Professional, coordinated, efficient. Marcus had seconds to decide, and his choice would determine everything. He could surrender to his colleagues, trust that somehow the system would protect him despite everything he'd discovered. Or he could fight people he'd called friends, knowing that resistance would only confirm their narrative about his mental instability. Either way, Marcus Webb would never leave this mansion that didn't exist. The study door burst open as tactical officers flooded in, weapons drawn, faces hidden behind masks that made them look like strangers rather than the people he'd worked beside for years. "Drop your weapon! Drop your weapon now!" Marcus realized he'd drawn his gun without thinking, muscle memory responding to threat even when the threat came from his own department. In the firelight, surrounded by evidence of systematic corruption, facing officers who saw him as just another problem to be solved, Marcus Webb understood the final horrible truth. He'd been investigating missing persons for 8 years. Now he was about to become one. Librarian Emma Hartley discovered the book at 2:34 a.m. during her monthly inventory audit, hidden behind a row of reference volumes in the basement archives. What made her blood run cold wasn't the book's unmarked spine or its suspicious placement. It was seeing her own name in the index, followed by intimate details about her life that no stranger should know. The rain drummed steadily against the basement windows of the Millbrook Public Library as Emma opened the leather-bound volume to a random page. Her hands trembled as she read a clinical description of her Tuesday evening routine. Subject returns home at 6:47 p.m., checks mailbox, bills from credit union, promotional materials from grocery store, unlocks apartment 3B using key with blue rubber grip. Feeds cat, Whiskers, gray tabby, age 4, before microwaving frozen dinner, usually Stouffer's brand. The entry was dated 3 weeks ago. Every detail was accurate, down to the brand of frozen dinner and the color of her key grip. Emma had worked at the Millbrook Public Library for 6 years, ever since graduating with her master's degree in library science. She knew every book in their collection, every hiding place in the old Carnegie building, every patron who came through their doors. This volume had never been here before. She flipped to the beginning, looking for publication information, copyright date, anything that might explain what she'd found. The title page simply read, Residential Monitoring Project Millbrook Neighborhood Assessment, with no author, publisher, or date listed. The table of contents made her stomach drop. Hundreds of names, all residents of the surrounding neighborhoods. Her neighbors, her friends, people she saw at the grocery store and coffee shop every day. Each name was followed by a page number and what looked like a classification code. Emma turned to her own entry, hoping against hope that what she'd seen was somehow a coincidence or misunderstanding. Instead, she found 12 pages of meticulous documentation about her private life. Her sleeping schedule, tracked down to the minute. Her shopping habits, including specific purchase records from stores she'd never used a membership card at. Her phone calls, with summaries of conversations she'd thought were private. The most recent entry was from yesterday. Subject experiencing increased stress levels due to upcoming performance review. Purchased wine, 2 bottles, Kendall Jackson Chardonnay, at 7:23 p.m. from Walgreens on 3rd Street. Returned home and made phone call to Sister Sarah at 8:45 p.m., duration 47 minutes. Conversation topics included work concerns and romantic disappointment regarding subject Davidson from coffee shop. Emma's hands shook as she read details about a conversation she'd had less than 24 hours ago, sitting in her locked apartment, speaking to her sister who lived 3 states away. How could anyone have recorded that call? Who was watching her closely enough to document her stress purchases and private conversations? She flipped to other entries at random. Mrs. Rodriguez from apartment 2A. Detailed logs of her medical appointments, her financial struggles after her husband's death, her secret correspondence with a man she'd met through an online dating site. The entry noted that she'd been lying to her adult children about her romantic life. David Chin, the coffee shop owner Emma had been quietly interested in for months. Comprehensive documentation of his business receipts, his immigration status concerns, his ongoing legal dispute with his ex-wife over custody of their daughter. Private information that could destroy his business and his personal life if it fell into the wrong hands. The book contained secrets that could ruin lives, relationships, careers. But who had compiled this information? And why was it hidden in the library basement? What Emma discovered next made her question everything she thought she knew about her community. Tucked between pages in the middle of the book, she found a collection of photographs. High-resolution images taken through windows, captured from impossible angles with telephoto lenses. Mrs. Rodriguez in her kitchen, unaware she was being watched. David Chin arguing with someone on his phone in what he thought was the privacy of his apartment. Emma herself, sitting at her computer, visible through her bedroom window. The photos were date-stamped and coordinated with the written entries. Professional surveillance, conducted over months or possibly years, documenting the private lives of ordinary citizens who had no idea they were being monitored. At the back of the book, Emma found what looked like operational notes, written in different handwriting than the main entries. References to patrol routes and coverage schedules. Mentions of equipment maintenance and data collection protocols. Most disturbing were the names listed under primary observers. Names she recognized as local police officers. Officer Janet Mills, who lived 2 blocks away and always smiled when Emma saw her at the farmer's market. Detective Ray Sullivan, who'd spoken at library events about community safety and building trust between citizens and law enforcement. Sergeant Kim Torres, who coached Little League and was beloved by neighborhood kids. They weren't just watching, they were systematically documenting the private lives of the people they'd sworn to protect. Emma photographed several pages with her phone, then carefully returned the book to its hiding place. Her mind raced as she tried to understand the implications. Was this legal? Was it connected to some kind of investigation? Or was it something much darker, A surveillance program targeting ordinary citizens for reasons she couldn't begin to imagine? The next morning, Emma called in sick and spent the day conducting her own investigation. She drove through her neighborhood with new eyes, noticing things she never paid attention to before. Security cameras on utility poles that seemed to point toward residential windows rather than streets. Parked cars with tinted windows that appeared in different locations throughout the week. Service vehicles for companies she'd never heard of, parked where workers could observe multiple apartment buildings. She researched the officers named in the book. All were decorated members of the Millbrook Police Department with spotless records and community involvement. Officer Mills had received a commendation for her work with domestic abuse victims. Detective Sullivan was known for his successful cold case investigations. Sergeant Torres had been featured in the local newspaper for her youth outreach programs. These weren't rogue cops or corrupt officials. They were pillars of the community, trusted by residents who had no idea their most private moments were being catalogued and studied. Emma returned to the library that evening, ostensibly to catch up on work she'd missed. She waited until the building was empty, then made her way back to the basement archives. The book was exactly where she'd left it, but something had changed. New entries had been added since yesterday. Emma found her own section and read with growing horror. Subject discovered monitoring documentation at 2:34 a.m. on yesterday's date. Subject photographed multiple pages using mobile device, iPhone 12, registered to Emma Hartley, 847-555-0329. Subject returned book to original location, believed surveillance undetected. Recommend immediate intervention. They knew. They knew she'd found the book, knew she'd taken photographs, knew exactly when and how she'd discovered their operation. But how was that possible? She'd been alone in the library, hadn't told anyone what she'd found, hadn't even accessed the photos on her phone. Unless they were monitoring more than just her neighborhood routine. Unless they were tracking her digital activity, her phone, her every movement in real time. Emma heard footsteps on the stairs leading to the basement. Slow, deliberate steps that echoed through the empty library. She quickly closed the book and stepped away from the shelf, trying to look casual as someone descended into the archives. Emma? What are you doing down here so late? It was Officer Janet Mills, dressed in civilian clothes, smiling the same friendly smile Emma had seen dozens of times at community events. Just catching up on inventory, Emma said, hoping her voice sounded normal. Had to call in sick today, didn't want to fall behind. That's dedication, Mills said, moving closer. Though I have to say, this basement gives me the creeps at night. All these old books and dark corners. Easy to imagine someone watching you from the shadows. The words sent ice through Emma's veins. Mills knew. She was here because of the book, because of Emma's discovery. You know, Emma, I've always admired your attention to detail. The way you notice things, remember things. It's a valuable skill for a librarian. Mills was now standing between Emma and the stairs, her position casual but blocking the only exit. Of course, sometimes noticing too much can be problematic. Sometimes people discover information they're not equipped to handle properly. Emma's heart hammered against her ribs. I should probably head home. Long day tomorrow. Actually, I think we should talk. About what you found last night. About the photographs you took. About what you think you understand. The truth behind everything was so much worse than Emma could have imagined. You see, Emma, the Millbrook Police Department takes community safety very seriously. We've developed innovative programs to stay ahead of problems before they become crises. Domestic abuse, financial fraud, drug activity, child endangerment, all of these issues start with patterns that can be detected through careful observation. Mills moved closer, her voice taking on the tone of someone explaining something to a child. The monitoring program has prevented 17 serious crimes in the past 2 years. Domestic violence situations we intervened in before they escalated. Financial scams we stopped before elderly residents lost their life savings. Drug dealers we identified before they could establish operations in family neighborhoods. But the book, Emma whispered. All those private details. People's conversations, their relationships, their personal struggles. Information is protection, Emma. Knowledge is safety. How can we keep people safe if we don't understand their lives, their vulnerabilities, their potential for both victimization and criminality? The final piece of the puzzle changed everything, and there was no going back. Mills pulled out her phone and showed Emma a series of photographs. Images of Emma in the library basement, time-stamped from the previous night. Her face clearly visible as she discovered the book, photographed its pages, read entries about her neighbors. We've been watching you for 6 years, Emma. Ever since you moved to Millbrook. Your background check for the library position was quite thorough. We know about your college activism, your concerns about privacy rights, your tendency to ask inconvenient questions. Emma realized with crystalline clarity that she hadn't stumbled upon the surveillance program by accident. The book had been placed where she would find it, when she would find it. Her discovery was part of their plan. We need someone on the inside, Emma. Someone with access to public records, research databases, community connections. Someone who understands the value of information and the importance of community safety. The choice Mills was offering wasn't really a choice at all. Join their surveillance program or become another problem that needed to be solved. What happened in those next few moments will stay with me forever. Emma looked around the basement archives, surrounded by books containing centuries of recorded human knowledge, and realized she was about to make a decision that would define the rest of her life. She could become complicit in the systematic violation of her neighbor's privacy, or she could resist and face consequences she was only beginning to understand. Through the basement windows, she could see the rain still falling, washing the streets clean while hidden cameras documented every movement in the neighborhood above. Somewhere in the darkness, other officers were conducting their own surveillance, adding new entries to files that would never see the light of day. People trust librarians, Mills said softly. They share things with you they wouldn't tell their own families. They ask you to help them research sensitive topics, find information about personal problems. You could be invaluable to our community protection efforts. Emma thought about Mrs. Rodriguez, about David Chin, about all the neighbors whose secrets filled the pages of that terrible book. She thought about the photographs taken through their windows, the conversations recorded in their homes, the trust they'd placed in the community that was systematically betraying them. I had seconds to decide, and my choice would determine everything. Emma looked at Officer Mills, at the phone displaying photographs of her discovery, at the basement filled with books that had once represented the free exchange of human knowledge. She realized that whatever choice she made, the Emma Hartley who had walked into this library tonight would never leave. The surveillance program would continue. The book would be updated. The neighborhood would remain under watch. The only question was whether Emma would become another victim in its pages, or another author contributing to its endless, invasive chronicle. Mills smiled and extended her hand, as if welcoming Emma to a community organization rather than a conspiracy. Outside, the rain kept falling, and the cameras kept watching. Thanks so much for watching. I can't express enough how much your support means. The likes, the comments, it all really helps the channel grow. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. I always take the time to read them. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss out on any new videos. See you next time.